Before the phone call happens, you've already lived through it going badly. Before the meeting starts, you've already imagined being blindsided, criticized, humiliated. Your mind runs the worst version first, every single time, as if rehearsing the disaster might somehow soften the blow if it actually arrives. Most of the time, it doesn't arrive at all. The call goes fine. The meeting is ordinary. Nothing close to the imagined catastrophe occurs. But the rehearsal happens anyway. Vivid, exhausting, and completely convincing. The entire time it's playing out inside your head. You've done this so often, you barely notice you're doing it anymore. Until you realize how much of your day gets spent inside imagined disasters. That's not pessimism. It's a specific mental habit with its own internal logic, and this video explains exactly what that logic is. Take an ordinary example. You need to send one direct message, one that might disappoint someone slightly. Before typing a single word, the spiral begins. You imagine their reaction. Cold, disappointed, maybe furious. You imagine the conversation that follows, word for word, entirely constructed in your head. You draft responses to accusations nobody has actually made yet. You rehearse defenses for arguments that exist only inside your own imagination. By the time you finally send the message, you've already experienced the worst possible version of the fallout. Sometimes multiple different versions. The actual reply arrives. It's fine. Maybe even kind. And something in you deflates slightly, unsure what to do with all that unused dread. This happens constantly, across nearly everything. Appointments, small conflicts, minor changes in plans. Each one gets the same preloaded disaster treatment. You've started to notice the pattern, but knowing it's happening doesn't seem to stop it. The rehearsal starts before you've consciously decided anything. This isn't simple worry, it's something more specific, and understanding it starts with understanding what your mind believes this rehearsal is accomplishing. Psychology has a term for this pattern: catastrophizing, automatically predicting the worst possible outcome, then mentally responding to it as though it's already real. This differs from simple worry, which tends to stay vague. Catastrophizing builds full, detailed scenes, dialogue, consequences, specific emotional reactions from everyone involved. Your mind treats the imagined scenario with startling realism, activating actual stress responses, even though nothing in the outside world has changed at all. This happens because the brain struggles to fully distinguish between vivid imagination and lived experience, especially when the imagined content feels emotionally significant. There's also a protective logic underneath it. If you've already imagined the worst, part of your mind believes you'll be prepared, unshockable, safe. This creates something like emotional insurance, prepaying the pain in advance, hoping to reduce however much might arrive later, if it arrives at all. The problem is the insurance gets paid constantly for disasters that mostly never happen, while genuine peace becomes an increasingly unfamiliar, rarely visited state. Over time, this becomes the default setting, rather than an occasional reaction, running quietly in the background of almost every uncertain situation. Here's what's actually occurring inside someone who develops this pattern early. Uncertainty itself becomes the primary trigger, more than any specific danger. If unpredictability once led to real, unavoidable pain, the mind may have concluded that predicting everything, even badly, felt safer than not knowing. A known disaster, however painful, can feel more manageable than an unknown outcome because at least the mind has already mapped out a response. So the brain preemptively fills every gap with worst-case content, trading the discomfort of uncertainty for the false comfort of imagined certainty instead. This is exhausting precisely because the body doesn't fully distinguish rehearsed disaster from real disaster, activating cortisol and adrenaline for events that never occur. People who grew up in unpredictable environments often develop this early, since scanning ahead for danger once served a genuinely protective function. Here's something worth holding on to, because we'll circle back to it directly. This habit reflects a mind trained for genuinely sophisticated threat modeling. As an adult, this can quietly consume enormous mental bandwidth, leaving less available for the actual present moment, which rarely matches the imagined version. You may notice relief feels strangely unfamiliar when good outcomes occur. Since the mind was never quite convinced the disaster wouldn't eventually still arrive, some people even continue rehearsing. After receiving good news, unconsciously searching for the catch they're certain must still be hiding somewhere nearby. Take the person who rehearses an entire breakup speech before a partner has said anything remotely concerning, purely from a slightly different tone. There's the one who imagines losing their job in vivid detail after a single neutral email from a manager, spiraling through unemployment scenarios instantly. Look at the person who mentally rehearses medical bad news before test results even exist, living through diagnoses that were never actually given. Take the one who prepares detailed responses to criticism from a friend who hasn't said anything critical, purely anticipating what might eventually be said. There's the person who imagines a plane crash in full detail before ordinary turbulence, treating the imagined scenario with the same weight as reality. Notice the one who rehearses being rejected before ever actually asking for what they want, experiencing the sting without ever risking the actual request. Take the parent who imagines worst-case accidents before a child leaves the house, running through catastrophic scenarios that almost never actually occur. There's the employee who rehearses being fired before every single performance review, regardless of consistently positive feedback received every previous time. Notice the one who imagines a friend's silence as anger, rather than simply being busy, constructing entire imagined conflicts from nothing but delay. And there's the quiet exhaustion of surviving disasters daily that never actually happen, while somehow still feeling perpetually, genuinely unprepared regardless. Go back to a detail glossed over earlier. This habit reflects a mind trained for genuinely sophisticated threat modeling, not simple, baseless pessimism. Building detailed, plausible worst-case scenarios requires real cognitive skill, imagination, pattern recognition, and the ability to anticipate complex chains of consequence. That's not weakness. That's a mind capable of running simulations most people never bother constructing, however exhausting that capability currently feels to carry. You develop this skill because uncertainty once required careful, constant tracking. The simulation wasn't random, it was built for genuine specific protection. The problem isn't that your mind can imagine worst-case scenarios. The problem is it's currently running that simulation for situations that rarely warrant it. Here's the reframe worth sitting with. You're not doomed to disaster, you're simply running a powerful prediction engine without an adequate off switch. That engine can be recalibrated. The same imaginative capacity used for catastrophe can eventually be redirected toward more accurate, less exhausting predictions instead. So how does this actually start to loosen? It begins with noticing the rehearsal as it starts, naming it directly. This is catastrophizing, not fact. It means asking a specific question, mid-spiral. What's the most likely outcome here, not simply the worst one my mind keeps generating? It means tracking outcomes over time, noticing how rarely the rehearsed disaster actually matches what genuinely happens, building real evidence against the pattern. It means practicing tolerating uncertainty briefly, without immediately filling the gap with imagined catastrophe, even when that gap feels genuinely uncomfortable at first. This mental habit protected you once, in situations that truly required constant vigilance. It was resourceful, adaptive, and genuinely necessary at the time. But most disasters you've rehearsed never actually arrived. You're allowed to trust that pattern now, more than the one your mind keeps predicting.